as one begins to read the Gospels, it doesn't take you very long to discover that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very, very similar in content. Just about each one of the parables or miracles that you will find in Mark or Luke, you will also find mention of it in Matthew. But then you come to the Gospel of John, and suddenly you discover a book full of fresh material. It seems that Matthew, Mark, and Luke dealt almost solely with Jesus' Galilean ministry, where Jesus did spend most of his ministry. And they only make fleeting references to the things that Jesus did when he was in Judea. Now, apparently John, when he was an old man, read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And he said, these fellows have left out a tremendous amount of very significant and important material. And so it is that John goes about filling in the details of the events of Jesus' ministry around Jerusalem. I used to have a very difficult time with the Gospel of John. I used to think that Mark was perhaps my most favorite Gospel. But then I realized that the problem that I had with John was the fact that John refers to himself all through his Gospel as the disciple whom Jesus loved. And we call him, John the beloved disciple. And that always struck me as just being a little bit of snobbery. He calls Peter, Peter, and Andrew, Andrew. And when he gets to himself, he says, the disciple whom Jesus loved. And it just never went down well with me at all. And then one day, I had some dear Greek scholar point out the truth of that passage to me. That the proper rendition of this from the Greek into the English should not be John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, but it should be rendered the disciple whom Jesus kept on loving. And suddenly the meaning of this passage completely turned around for me. For John was not talking about how great he was, that Jesus loved him more than the others. But what he was saying was that no matter how many foolish and stupid things that I did in my life with Jesus, Jesus kept on loving me. And he wasn't commenting about John, he was commenting about how great Jesus was. He was one of the sons of thunder, one of those fellows who you didn't mess around with because he had a brother who would step into the fray with him. I have two sons, and they're little. They're about 7 and 9, and you probably could take one of them on by yourself, but if the other one is close by, you're going to have to take both of them on, because each one watches out for the other. And so it was with the sons of thunder. You didn't mess around with James without having to contend with John too. These fellows, well, they're rather interesting men. Apparently they came from an affluent household because in the Gospel of Mark we find mention of the fact that their father had servants, and yet they were fishermen, not poor fishermen, obviously. They must have made a good living with the boats that they had up there on the sea. And they were men who were used to getting their own way. It's rather interesting. John had been with Jesus for about 3 years. And they're on their way now from Galilee down to Jerusalem for that last fateful Passover service. And as they're coming through Samaria, Jesus says to them, I'd like you to go into that Samaritan town and get accommodations for us this evening. And James and John went into the town to get accommodations for Jesus. And it's something that I think we should all realize, that in Palestine, when you went into a town in the evening as a stranger, it was not your responsibility to seek for a place to stay. It was the custom of the land that threw the responsibility upon the residents of the town. It was their responsibility to seek you out on the street and offer you hospitality and accommodations. And so they go into this town and they are approached. And they say who they are, and the people say, "Terrific. Jesus is very welcome here. Come and bring him. We want him to come and stay. However, if he is going to leave us in the morning and he's going down to Jerusalem to minister unto those Jews down there, he's not welcome." And I want to tell you, James and John came out of that town absolutely burning. And they came up to Jesus and they wanted to do a little more burning. They said, "The Lord, they don't want us in there. Let's call down fire from heaven and burn them all up." And you know, Jesus looked at them and he must have shook his head as he said, John, don't you understand that we've come to the world to save people, not to destroy them?" And so John says, despite all of this, Jesus kept on loving me. Despite the fact that they tried a little nepotism and had their mother go to Jesus and ask for special places for them. You know, I often wondered, their mother went and asked that when Jesus came into his rightful place, that her sons would have the right hand and the left hand. And I wonder what she thought when she climbed Calvary that Friday afternoon and looked at a man on the right hand and a man on the left hand and realized that she had asked for those two places for her sons. John says, despite this, Jesus kept on loving me. I love that, don't you? No matter what kind of foolish nonsense you do, no matter how many times you fail and stumble and fall, Jesus keeps on loving you. He never stops. And that's one of the most exciting things that we can ever learn from the Gospel of John. But I'll tell you, there's some more other good things in John. Things in John that we just wouldn't know about Jesus if it were not for the fact that he felt an impulse of the Holy Spirit to write them down for us. The very first major miracle of Jesus at the wedding feast at Cana is not mentioned in the first three Gospels. We only find it in John. We made a fleeting reference to it last evening. I made the reference, the fact that, no, it wasn't last evening, I guess it was the evening before, that I felt that Jesus turned the water into the wine somewhat for the benefit of Nathanael. By the way, you might be interested that Jesus turned 120 gallons of water into wine. Good wine. That's a lot. But I think that perhaps one of the greater reasons for that miracle had to do with Jesus' own mother. Do you remember at the wedding? His mother was the one who came and said, we've run out of wine, do something. Have you ever wondered why she asked him to do something? Why did she expect him to do something? He hadn't performed any miracles during those first 30 years of his life. Why does she somehow expect him to do something now? Well, she has heard about his baptism. She heard about the voice and the dove from John. She also cannot help but notice that Jesus is very changed now. After the 40 days fasting in the wilderness, he has lost 1/2 of his body weight. And he has not gained it back yet. He is extremely thin. And so she has a feeling that the time has come. And the time has come not so much for Jesus, but the time has come for her. Because for 30-some years, Mary has lived with a stigma of having been pregnant before she was married. Nazareth had been a little town. And everybody in that town well knew that Mary was not married. She couldn't even stand the whispers and the talk in town. That's why she went and stayed with Elizabeth in another town. She couldn't stand it anymore in Nazareth. All the relatives and the friends, And I'll tell you, there is nothing that I think hurts us more than to be accused of some horrible wrongness when we know that we're totally and completely innocent. But I mean, how could she tell anybody the truth? You know very well that if a 17 or 18-year-old girl came to you who was not married and said to you that she was going to have a baby, and she maintained that it was from the Holy Spirit, you know very well what your response would be. She couldn't tell. It was a secret of her life. It was a shame that she lived with. And she's living with it, and the only thing that really keeps her going is that she knows the truth. And she believes in her heart that someday Jesus is going to take the throne, she is going to be the Queen Mother, and she will be vindicated. And everyone will know the truth. And now here at the wedding, all of the relatives are present. Aunt Susie is there, and Uncle Harry is there. And what a better time than this for Jesus to do something spectacular to show them all the truth. And I think in many ways, Jesus, well, you know, He said to her, "Woman, my time has not yet come." But yet He still does the miracle. And He does it for her sake. And then, while everybody is absorbing this fantastic new wine, He disappeared. He wasn't there when they ran around to do all the patting on the back and, "Hey, how did you do that?" He was gone. The Gospel of John records this for us. If it wasn't for the Gospel of John, we would be lost to the truth about Nicodemus and who he was and how he knew so much about Jesus. John chapter 3, one of the most powerful sermons that's ever been preached to anyone, is preached to one man, one-to-one evangelism, one-to-one witnessing. Jesus and Nicodemus. The most famous verse in all of the Bible, John 3:16, was not spoken to a great, massive multitude of 20,000, but was spoken to one man that night in the Garden of Gethsemane on the slopes of the Mount of Olives. Fantastic. If it wasn't for the Gospel of John, we wouldn't know about the woman at the well. We wouldn't know much about the first cleansing of the temple when Jesus comes into the temple. The very first night here, we talked about the fact that when Jesus was 12, one of the most disillusioning things of his whole life was to go into the temple and discover that it was not a place of prayer. And 18 years later, now at the beginning of his ministry, he decides that he is going to do something about it. He has been baptized now for about 3 or 4 months at the most. He has now come with his new disciples into Jerusalem for that first Passover. And as he walks up into the temple, and he has been there several times now since he was 12, most likely every year, the time has now come. And we're told that he looked over and by one of the great pillars, he saw a cattle whip. And he reached down and he picked it up and he looked out over that congregation of people and saw what was going on. And they hated it and deplored it. For the cheating and the stealing was absolutely unforgivable. The Jewish people have been taught that it was absolutely necessary for the salvation of their family to offer a lamb at Passover time at Jerusalem for their family. If you lived within 50 miles of Jerusalem, you had to come every year. If you lived beyond 50 miles of Jerusalem, it was required that you had to come to Jerusalem at least once in your lifetime. And so it was that people from Asia Minor, people from Italy, people from North Africa, from Mesopotamia would save. Poor families would save and scrimp and put every penny that they had away for this one great journey to Jerusalem at Passover time. And they would find the finest lamb that they could find that they might be able to bring for that Passover. And they would come, and as they would come to the temple, they would stand there waiting in line for the priest to come and help them with the sacrificing of their sheep. And we're told that there were rabbis whose total education was in the area of the physiology of a lamb. That was their total education. They were PhDs in sheep physiology. And we're told that they were required to physically examine every sheep to make sure that it was a perfect lamb and it had no deformities. And by the way, what they meant by a perfect lamb was not that it didn't have a scratch or a pimple or something on it somewhere. That did not disqualify it. Because you see, they sacrificed 225,000 sheep in 1 week. That comes out to about over 1 a minute from sunrise to sunset for 7 days. Now, obviously, you're not going to find 225,000 pimple-less sheep in 1 week. And so what they required was that the animal have no major deformity, something that had crippled it, or something that was, dislocated or out of place. And so what would happen is a man would come and he would present his perfect sheep. And the rabbi would kneel down and he would begin to feel it all over. And 9 times out of 10, he would eye the man and see the man's clothing and try and listen to the man's accent to tell if he was, a pilgrim and wasn't a local resident. And if he was someone who was not a local man, the rabbi would look up and he would say, "Sir, I'm sorry, this sheep is unacceptable." And the man would say, "Well, how come? Why? What's wrong?" And he said, "Well, sir," he says, "it looks good on the outside, but in my examination of the abdomen area, I have found a deformity over here in one of the organs. This sheep is no good." And the man, he doesn't know what he's going to do. He spent everything that he has getting his family there and buying the sheep. And just about this time, someone taps him on the shoulder and says, "Hey, my friend, I see you're having a little difficulty. Tell you what, I'll take that sheep off your hands for about $10. Well, now the sheep is no good to him. It's not acceptable as a sacrifice. And so he sells his sheep to this man for $10. Now he's left with $10 and no sheep. And the man says, "Tell you what," he says, "you need a sheep? See those pens over there? Those sheep over there are all government rabbi inspected sheep. You go over there, they're perfect, buy one of those." And so the man goes over to the fence and he says, "I'd like to buy a sheep." And the man says, "Terrific, $20. And he says, $20? I just sold a lamb over there for $10. "Oh, yes, sir, but the lamb you sold over there, that was defective. These are government inspected." Now, if you had been taught to believe that the salvation, the eternal salvation of your family depended on the sacrificing of that animal, you would cough up the extra $10. You'd get it from somewhere. Meanwhile, while he was buying that sheep, the sheep that he just sold for $10 was taken around and put in the back of the pen to sell to the next pilgrim that came along. Jesus saw this. He saw the cheating and the stealing and the conniving, and it galled him inside. Another requirement that they had to do was that they had to pay a half-shekel temple tax, also for their family's redemption. And the man would come up to the treasurer at the gate there, and he would reach deep into his pocket, and he would pull out his half-shekel, and he would lay it on the table, and the temple tax collector wouldn't touch it. He would hold up his hands like this, and he'd say, "Where did you get that half-shekel?" "Well, where do you know where you get the coins that are in your pocket?" He says, "Well, I think I bought some food at a bazaar down here on the street this morning, and that was given to me as change." "Aha," said the tax collector, "I knew it. It is most likely that coin has been touched by a Gentile. Because there are many Roman soldiers and Gentiles moving through the streets of the city and having commerce. That money most likely is defiled and it is not acceptable." And the man says, "Well, I think probably all of the change that I have in my pocket is in that category. What do I do?" And the man says, "Listen, you take that coin and you go over there, those tables, now there are money changers over there, and they will exchange that and give you money that is guaranteed undefiled by Gentile hands." And so the man goes over and he lays down his half shekel, and the man lays down a fourth of a shekel in return. And he says, wait a minute. And he says, I gave you a half shekel. And the man says, there's been no mistake. The exchange is 2 to 1. And so it was that a man believed that the salvation of his family was in jeopardy. He pays the extra money. The temple gets its half shekel. The priests pocket the other half shekel. Jesus cannot stand it any longer. And with a great voice he cries out, make not my Father's house a house of merchandising. And we're told that the divinity that was inherent within him flashed out like a strobe light. And a great silence came in that courtroom. And they all turned and they looked. And as they felt like they were looking into the eyes of God himself on the day of judgment. And he began to move down through that corridor. And he came to the first table. And he reached under with his hand and he flipped it up, and gold and silver clatter all over the floor. And no one stops to get it. They suddenly in terror begin to flee and run. And we're told that the animals ran with him. The sheep and the cows. Can you not imagine the scene? Mass hysteria. As all of these people are running for the gate, trying to get out of there. Cows and sheep and people all together. And you know when cows and sheep are excited. You know. I can tell. It was terrible. People slipping and falling, and trying to get out. And one thing that was really terrific, really absolutely fantastic, is that there were some people who didn't have enough money for all the exchanging, to make up for the cheating, and they were kept outside the temple by the temple guards and were not allowed inside to pray. Can you believe that? They wouldn't let them in to pray because they couldn't pay. No pay, no pray. It was that bad. But the guards have fled also. And we're told that all of the poor people that were waiting outside, longing to come in to pray, now find the gate unguarded, and they stream into the temple. And they come in and they get around Jesus and they surround him. And Jesus begins to move through their midst and he begins to heal them. And he begins to heal all of their needs, this man and this man and this man. And the people begin to sing praises and hosannas and hallelujahs in the temple. And about this time, the priests gather their composure outside. And they begin to look at each other and they say, do you realize that we ran from one man? What is this? And they turned around. And by the way, the pen of inspiration tells us they vowed they would never again run from him. 3 years later, 5 days before the crucifixion, Jesus cleansed the temple again. And the pen of inspiration tells us that they ran faster the second time than they did the third. Really. It is no wonder they were determined to get him. But they now gather up their composure and they come inside. And I can hardly believe what Desire of Ages tells us here, but it says that they had the audacity to come to Jesus. And they said to him, stop these people from making all of this noise and defiling the temple with their presence. They were praying and singing hallelujahs to God. And the priest asked Jesus to stop them from defiling the temple. Can't believe it. Fantastic story. Straight out of the Gospel of John. John is so full. Some of the greatest things that Jesus did, some of his greatest and most significant miracles were Sabbath morning miracles. We're told it is a year later now, after he has cleansed the temple. It is the second Passover of his ministry. He is very early in the morning on his way to the temple in Jerusalem for prayer. And he comes by a place called the Pool of Bethesda. And now, the Pool of Bethesda was a place called the Five Porches. It had 5 porches around it. And those porches were filled with invalids and blind people and deaf people and people with shrunken and shriveled up limbs. And we're told that as Jesus comes by there, he is moved with compassion. For those people in there believed that when the water would bubble up, the first one in would be healed. And we're told that they would trample over each other like animals to try and get in when the water stirred. And as Jesus moves by, we're told that He wants so badly to heal absolutely every person that was there. But it was Sabbath morning. And He realized that if He should do a mass healing like this on Sabbath morning at that pool, that He would never live to see the sun set. And He still had 2 years of very important things to say yet. And so we're told He is on His way by, but there is one individual that He just can't pass by. It is a man who has not been able to walk for 38 years. Now, as I look over this congregation this evening, it appears to me that the greater majority of people in this room tonight have not lived yet for 38 years. And I want you to think of this man who had not walked for a longer time than you have lived. And we're told that he had no one to help him. He had actually given up hope. The Pen of Inspiration tells us that he could not walk as a result of his own sin, as a result of a social disease. And so it was that his own pastor, the rabbi, came by one day and said to him, "Do you know you are suffering because of God's judgment upon you? You are not able to walk now because of your sin, a sin that God cannot forgive." And this man was so filled with hopelessness, for there was no one to help him in this life, and he was afraid to die because the rabbis had told him that when he died, he was going to go to hell because God could not accept him because of his sin. You talk about a totally hopeless individual. Nothing now and nothing in the future. But he had finally given up. He was laying on his filthy mat. No one to help him. No one to care for his physical needs. He's laying in his own human filth on that rotten, stinking mat with his face to the wall. And he is about now to die. And Jesus cannot pass him by. It is too pathetic. And Jesus comes, and he knelt down, and he put his face between that man's face and the wall. You know, and suddenly the man opens his eyes, and he sees this very kind, upside-down face looking at him. And the face says to him, "Would you like to be made well?" I mean, what a question. Would you like to be made well? The man hasn't walked for 38 years. Would you like to be made well? And we're told that for just a fleeting instant, just for a moment, that there was something about the way Jesus said it. There was a look of love and power in his eyes that gave that man just a spark of hope. And then the spark died. And he said, "Sir, I have no one to help me. There's no way." And Jesus said to him, "There is a way. Stand up and walk. Take up your bed." And there must have been such authority in his voice that it actually made the man try. And as he tried, he felt a flow of electricity come from within through his limbs, and those skinny, shriveled-up legs fleshed out and filled with strong muscles. And can't you see him getting up? I cannot see him getting up and going, "Oh, I haven't walked for 38 years. No, not at all. He must have bounded to his feet. And he was up. And the man said, "Roll up your bed." And he rolls up his bed and he turns around and Jesus is gone. Now it's Sabbath morning. And where do you go on Sabbath morning? You go to church. Everybody goes to church on Sabbath. He hasn't been to church for 38 years. And he starts off for church. And here he is. He's dirty, and the mat's dirty, and he's walking into church, a deplorable specimen of humanity. But he's happy. And he's smiling, and his eyes are gleaming. And some of the rabbis come over, and they say, "Hey, wait a minute. What are you doing coming in here like that? Didn't you know Did you can't go to church with blue jeans on? Did you know you've got to have a necktie on? I can tell you've been to the same churches I've been to. You can't come in here. And the man says, by the way, you're carrying your bed. Don't you know that's wrong on the Sabbath? And the man said, listen, don't you recognize me? Pastor, don't you recognize me? I'm the man you said there was no hope for. And he says, I'm carrying my bed because the man who told me to walk told me to carry it. Now they knew that there was only one man who could do this kind of a thing. But they wanted to hear it. And they said, when did this happen? And he said, just now, a few moments ago. And they said, who did it? And he said, I have no idea. He didn't know. He had no idea who did it. Well, we're told that Jesus, by this time also had arrived at church. He's walking in the courtyard of the temple and he sees the man. And he comes up and he taps the man on the shoulder. And the man wheels around. And he sees him. And Jesus says to him, listen, he said, do not use your newfound blessing and strength to go and sin some more. And they talk a while. And the man doesn't know the animosity of the priest towards Jesus. He thinks the priests really want to know who did it. And so he goes over to the rabbis and he says, I know who did it now. I know it was Jesus. It was him over there. Not realizing the trouble that he was about to get Jesus into. And the priests run over immediately, and we're told that Jesus was arrested. And he was that Sabbath afternoon, he was placed on trial by the Sanhedrin for Sabbath breaking. I think it's rather interesting when we think of the trials of Jesus, we think of them before the Sanhedrin on that fateful Thursday night before the crucifixion. But this is 2 years before his death. And he is now standing before the Sanhedrin. He is on trial. Isn't this something? The creator of the Sabbath is on trial now for Sabbath breaking. And I can hardly believe what we are told, but it is true. It is in Desire of Ages in the chapter called Bethsaida and the Sanhedrin. It says that Sabbath afternoon, as Jesus stood in the presence of the Sanhedrin, he unveiled his divinity. He showed them and told them who he was. And they steeled up and shut their hearts to him. Never in the day of judgment can Caiaphas stand before the throne and say, Father, I didn't know who he was. For 2 years before his death, Jesus revealed his divinity to those men. And they shut up their hearts to it. It is almost unfathomable for us to understand, but it is the truth. They knew who he was those next 2 years as they follow him and harass him and seek to kill him. For he does not conform to their own desires of what a Messiah should be. Fantastic. John must have really felt these were important stories. He didn't want to let them pass by. He tells us the story of well, I've got to share one more with you. It is so neat. Jesus and his disciples are walking through the city of Jerusalem again. It is most likely at the Feast of the Tabernacles. And they come by a man who's sitting there blind. He'd been born blind. Never had seen anything. And the disciples said, Lord, why is this man born blind? And Jesus said, he was born blind, that God might be glorified. By the way, this was a Sabbath miracle too. And we're told that Jesus went over in front of the man, and he knelt down, and he spit in the ground, which also was a violation of the Sabbath. You were not allowed to spit on the Sabbath. And the reason for that was, if your spit would land on a blade of grass or a plant somewhere, you would be irrigating, and that was part of the farming process. No, that's true. I'm not putting you on. It really is. Jesus spits on the ground, and he mixes up a dust clay spit compound. And he takes this now, and he reaches up, and he smears it onto the man's eyes. And he says to the man, I want you now to go to the pool of Siloam here in the city, and I want you to wash that off. And you will see. Again, how can we understand? How can we possibly understand that, the feelings of that man as he went to the pool? He knew the city well. He had no trouble finding it, even though he was blind. But how his heart must have beat in the anticipation and the joy that he was going to be like other people. He was going to be able to see what his own mother and father looked like. And when he comes and he kneels down by that pool, and he splashes the water up in his eyes, and he rubs it away. And the first thing he sees are hands and his own hands. And the waves and the ripples that he has made as he is washing the dirt away from his eyes, they settle down, and he sees for the first time a reflection of himself. Can you not imagine what it would be like to go through life not knowing what yourself looked like? Not knowing whether you had brown hair or blonde hair or red hair? Oh, you say, well, somebody could tell you had red hair. But if you had never seen the color red, how do you describe red to somebody who can't see? He didn't know. And he gets up. And it's Sabbath morning. And where do you go on Sabbath morning? You go to church. And he's on his way to church. And as he's on his way to church, he's walking along and he's singing and, hi, how are you, friend? Good to see you today, And he really meant it. Good to see you today. And we're told that on the way, people were saying, hey, isn't that, no, it couldn't be. And he heard them saying that, and he turned and he says, yes, it can be. He says, I really am. It's me. And we're told that as he came into the temple, he caused such a stir. And he's telling everybody about what happens. He knows who it was. He knows it was Jesus. He hasn't seen him, but he knows, because he had talked with him. And the priests immediately come around him, and they say, hey, how can you see? And he says, Jesus did this, and he described the spit and the dirt and the washing. And they can't accept this at all. And they've heard the whole story. So we're told that they called for the man's parents. This is all found in John 9. It is fantastic. They call for the man's parents. And the man's parents come in. And they begin to questioning them. And they say, listen, they said, is this your son? And they said, yes, that's our son. And they said, was he born blind? And they said, yes, he was born. He has never seen. He has never seen. And they said, how is it then, can you explain that he can see now? Now, it just so happens that there was already a rule passed that anyone that expressed faith in Jesus Christ as a prophet or a Messiah or anything was to be excommunicated. And they didn't want to be excommunicated. And I love their response, because they turn back to the priest and they say to them, listen, he's 21. Ask him. That's what it says. It says he's of age. Ask him. Ask him. And so they're not going to get anywhere with them because they don't want to be thrown out. And so they turn back to him again and they say to him again, how is it that you can see? And he says to them, I think it is absolutely amazing, he said, that you don't know. And they said, listen, give praise and glory to God. Don't give it to that Jesus, because we know that Jesus was a sinner. And he says, I don't know if Jesus is a sinner or not. But he says, this one thing I know. He says, I know that I was blind, and now I see. And he says, by the way, why do you want me to tell you about it again? I told you once. Do you want to be his disciples too? Oh, John tells us they reviled him. They were so angry. And they turned to him and they said, "We don't know where this Jesus comes from. We are disciples of Moses." And the man turned to them and he said, "That's strange." They said that here is someone who has come into our midst. And he has healed me who was blind, something that has never been done before. And you claim you don't know where he comes from. And they were told that they turned over and they said, "How can you, being born of such low birth, teach us anything?" And they called for the temple guards and they threw him out. And he didn't care. I mean, he could see. And he's outside walking around praising God. And we're told that Jesus comes up to him now. And Jesus taps him on the shoulder. And he wheels around. And Jesus now introduces himself to him. Now we're told that Jesus was not a handsome man. He was just a common, ordinary looking human being. But I'll bet you anything that that was the most handsome face that man ever saw. For he had been blind, and now he saw. Oh, I tell you, how many of us have been blind, but through meeting Jesus Christ, we can now see. Oh, praise God. Jesus is so exciting. He is so real. He is so warm. He is so loving and caring that He wants so much to take care of our needs and to help us to see. You know, one thing that really stirs my heart as I continue to read through the Gospel of John is that when I get to John chapter 14, now I praise God that John wrote this down for us, for John 14 is so beautiful. But Jesus says in John 14, "Don't worry that I'm going away. The very works that I do, you shall be able to do also. And even greater works than these, you will be able to do." Have you ever wondered why there are not more miracles within our midst? Now, it's true. We do have miracles in our midst. We do have anointings. We do have things that we can point to and see where the Holy Spirit has very much, in a very powerful way, come into our midst and done things for us. When I just began my ministry, we had a baby in our church in Waterloo, Iowa, who was born blind. And we anointed that child. And that child sees today just fine. We have these things. They do happen. But they're rare. They're really rare. And I have to honestly ask myself the question, why don't we see more? Is it because we do not have the same living connection with the Father that Jesus did? We are assured that absolutely everything that Jesus did on earth, we can do. We are given the assurance that He used no power at all, that it was done available now to us as His children. He was our example. He came to show us how to do it and what to do. And I really ask myself, why? A few years ago, I was in-gathering in a little town in Calhoun, Georgia. And I came into an undertaker's establishment. I asked for our usual yearly gift. And as I was walking along into his office, I passed one of the little rooms by the side where there was a casket, a lot of flowers. And as I passed by, I saw a young man, probably about 30 years old, standing before a little casket, just, not very long. And he was just standing there all by himself in that room, totally silent, looking into that box. And as I slipped back onto the office of the undertaker, I asked him, I said, who is that out there, and what's the story? And he told me that that man's 5-year-old little boy, his only son, had been run over by an automobile and had been killed. And I can remember slipping back out of the office, and as I came down the hall, I stopped. And as I looked into that room, you will never know. You will never know how much I wanted to walk into that room. And I wanted to put my arm around that man, and I wanted to say to him, Jesus Christ gives you back your son, little boy, arise. I wanted to do that so bad. But I bowed my head, and I walked out of that funeral parlor without even trying. And you say, Elder Bothwell, if you wanted to do it so badly, why didn't you try? Do you want to know the real reason why? Because I thought, if I get up there and I do that, and nothing happens, I'm going to look like a fool. And I didn't want to be personally embarrassed. I was afraid of my own ego. I was afraid of what I might look like. That I might look like a fool. And isn't that really the whole problem with us all? We're afraid about ourselves. Isn't that the whole sin problem? It's I, what I might look like, what I want, and what I want to do, and what I want people to think I am. And because I was so concerned with myself, I never even tried for that man. I never even tried for what might have been the greatest miracle of that man's whole life. And it brought him truly to Jesus Christ. I hate to make hospital visits. I hate to visit in nursing homes. As I go down the halls of nursing homes, I feel so guilty that I cannot hardly bear the guilt. And I go out and I sit in my car and I say, I'm never going back again. Of course I have to. It's my job. But I hate it. Because I realize that those people in that nursing home are getting older and older, and they're dying, and they're wasting away, and they're hurting. Because I have not established a contact with God the Father through the Holy Spirit that would enable me to do something about it. And I'd say if this church has any need at all, it is a need for someone in our midst. Someone who is truly humble. Someone who would be able to walk up to a dead child and say, arise in the name of Jesus, and walk away and still be humble. I know me. I know that if I would do that and that child would come to life, I would walk it out of there thinking that I was God's gift to humanity. And I pray that there would be someone in our midst, humble enough, and so much in love with Jesus Christ, and someone so little concerned about themselves, that God would be able to do this through them. And how it might finally awaken us and drive some of the rest of us into a deeper prayer life and a deeper experience with Jesus. I really believe with all of my heart that if just one of us would be able, that there would be many that would follow. But we need so badly for an Enoch to so walk with God in our midst. We can do the works of Jesus Christ. You have to believe that. If you believe the Scriptures, if you believe the Bible, you have to believe that. And we tonight stand as a people Laodicea, we're so rich. Oh man, are we rich. And we are so poor. Oh, we are so poor. Tonight, if you get anything from what I said, I pray that you would understand the need to go back to your room and to pray. Oh, that we would be a people of prayer. And then everything else will come in its wake. There will be no need for any more great evangelistic campaigns. No need for any more $50,000 budgets for one series of meetings. Now, we've spent that much in this church on series of meetings and places, and a lot more than that. You know, we're like, remember when Peter said to the lame man, "Silver and gold have I none, but what I do have I give unto you"? What Peter gave to that man that day, we don't have to give. We have the silver and gold to give instead. How pathetic. I would love to change the silver and gold for what Peter had. Oh, may God grant it to us through the power of Jesus Christ. I love Jesus so much tonight. Don't you love Him? Can't you see Him as He moves through the streets of Jerusalem with these people? Can't you see Him come and throw His arms around Jairus and say, "Jairus, it's going to be all right. Your daughter's going to be well. Come, let's go home." Oh, I love Him so. Would you sing with me again tonight? My Jesus, I love Thee. I know Thou art mine. For Thee all the follies of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, my Savior art Thou. If ever I love Thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. Oh Lord Jesus, tonight, oh please tonight, move into our hearts like it's never been before. And oh God, all over this campground, tonight, let there be found a people on their knees. In Jesus' name. Amen.
You have been listening to another special American Christian Ministries presentation. International copyright, all rights reserved. Free listening of this message and over 7,000 other presentations by more than 100 speakers on 50 different topics is now available on our American Christian Ministries mobile app for Android and Apple devices and on our secure website. You may also order presentations online at AmericanChristianMinistries.org or call 800-233-4450. Your prayers and continued financial support are very important to ensure the continuation of this ministry as we help to prepare America and the world to meet Jesus Christ. He's coming soon.